theory of foreign policy decision making. FPDM is one of 5R theories that explains how foreign policy decisions are made. Okay. Why a separate theory is needed? Because it is found that many IR theories, take for example realism, it explains why states should do this, okay, or will do this, why or how they pursue self-interest. So the assumption is that there are certain problems, factors, and the states will analyze and they will think, they will identify what is in their interest and they will do their best. So theories assume why states do something. Okay, they give certain objective factors. They give certain objective factors. But it is found there is a lot of gap between what the theories suggest and the actual decision making. Okay, so this theory of foreign policy decision making addresses this issue between the theory and the actual. Okay. One of the books that comes in this school is this book, Essence of Decision. Essence of Decision, Explaining the Cuban Missile Crisis by Graham T. Allison. Graham Allison wrote his wrote this first in 1971. And then he revised it in 1999. He rewrote along with Philip Zelikow in the light of new material available. So he gives how the actual decisions are being made in the taking an example of Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, this book is given this title Essence of Decision because of what Kennedy said. The essence of ultimate decision remains impenetrable to the observer, often indeed to the decider himself. Okay, so even the decider does not know why and how he made that decision. So what is going on here? Allison proposes that many IR scholars assume rational actor. Okay, many assume rational actor, and there is an alternative model that is called organizational process model. Organizational. Okay, he said people assume rational actor model, but there is an alternative model also, that is organizational process model. Okay, but Allison's preference is governmental politics model. Governmental politics model. He says that IR theories assume states to go by rational expectations theory. Rational expectations theory in economics, assuming states consider all options, act rationally, and maximize utility. Okay. So IR theories assume this, and any decision is arranged according to rational model. It must be noted, however, that an imaginative analyst can construct an account of value maximizing choice for any action or set of actions performed by a government. He says decisions are explained in terms of rational actor model. Okay. Now, Allison explains Cuban Missile Crisis in terms of first two models, and then says how those two models are inadequate. Okay. Take, for example, rational actor model. According to rational actor model, government is the primary actor. Okay. And a set of goals examined when there is a crisis, and alternatives considered, and the one with highest utility picked up. So in a rational actor model, there is a crisis, many alternatives considered, alternatives consequences worked out, and then a choice that leads to maximization of utility is considered, is taken. So this assumes that the governments consider all possibilities and work out consequences and then maximize the utility or their interest. So theories explain in terms of how things are logical. Okay, theories say theories describe events in terms of logical connections. Okay. How do theories explain something like a Cuban Missile Crisis? Okay. You know, this crisis happened because USSR kept nuclear missiles in Cuba, and US discovered it. And president at the time was JF Kennedy, and USSR leader was Khrushchev. that was a major nuclear war flashpoint. It could have led to a nuclear war. Okay, how do rational theories explain this? They will explain, say, in like this. JFK in 1961 said USSR had fewer ICBMs than USSR claimed. Okay, so fewer ICBMs, because of which Khrushchev ordered nuclear missiles in Cuba to be kept in Cuba. And he calculated that because of the failure of Bay of Pigs invasion, and this was an effort by the US to invade Cuba, because it failed, US won't invade. Okay, so US criticized that there were not enough ICBMs. This is rational. And then as a response, Khrushchev kept missiles in Cuba. Okay, because those short-range missiles would do enough damage. So this is again rational. And then how safe are they? US won't invade because its previous attempt failed. This is also rational and this is also rational. Okay. And once the US discovered the missiles, it ordered blockade of Cuba. Why blockade of Cuba and not airstrikes and a direct war? Because blockade won't escalate into nuclear war. So USA explored all options and finally chose blockade as the best option. So Kennedy and his advisors, called XCOM, evaluated all options and finally chose blockade. And if blockade is tried to be breached by the USSR, the ships were sent. Cuba blockaded by USA ships, and USSR didn't try to breach this blockade and go. Otherwise, this would have led to nuclear war. And nuclear war would lead to mutually assured destruction. So because of mutually assured destruction, Soviets removed the weapons. This is also rational. So this model explains how USA tried to maximize its self-interest, USSR tried to maximize self-interest, and finally, why this backing out is in the self-interest of both the nations. Okay, so this is a rational actor model. Some modifications will be made if organizational process model is chosen. Organizational process model is based on the work of March and Simon. Okay. What it says is that all alternatives will not be considered, nor all the consequences will not be considered. Okay. So instead of taking all alternatives and all consequences and the one that is choosing an option that is maximizing values, Simon said decisions are simply good enough decisions. Good enough decisions. He called them satisficing decisions. Satisficing decisions. Okay. That is satisfying plus sufficing. Satisficing decisions, which are good enough decisions. So it means something that is approximately good decision will be taken and not the most rational. That is Simon's viewpoint. And he also said that in choosing this approximately rational decision, satisfying decision, governments would prefer the decisions that limit short-term uncertainty. So between long-term and short-term, they are likely to go by short-term, and which would reduce short-term uncertainty. And then between completely new plans and old plans, they are more likely to follow pre-existing plans. Okay. And then he also said, decisions are broken and given as per pre-established organizational lines. So there will be certain organizations. Each organization will be involved in a particular part of the decision. And then organizations follow certain procedures in taking actions. Okay. So he looked at it in terms of organizational division of labor and certain set of procedures. Okay. So for example, in the case of Cuban Missile Crisis, the model would say Soviets failed to camouflage the site. So they kept the weapons, but they failed to hide. And barracks decorated with Red Army stars viewable from above. So why did they do this mistake? It is because there were no proper procedure for nuclear sites outside their country. So this is something completely new, and the organization that was expected to manage couldn't respond properly to this new situation. So that is why they were easily found out. Okay. And then blockade was chosen because blockade was a pre-existing plan, whereas they have almost decided airstrike, but unsure it would disable all missiles and unsure of collateral damage. So not sure of possible consequences. So it is not that they worked out and arrived at the best choice. So unsure of what airstrikes would lead to, they went by pre-existing plan. They were sure of blockades. And how did USSR respond? USSR respond, basically it was confused and they didn't have any backup plan. Because what USSR did also did it for the first time. So organizational process model explains constraints in terms of time and resources in managing or in deciding. So as opposed to these two, Allison proposes governmental politics model. Okay, governmental politics model. First, let us see his explanation of what happened. Khrushchev came under pressure from the Presidium because of the lack of ICBMs. Khrushchev came under pressure. And at the time, Soviet economy was being stretched. Red Army size was cut because of economic reasons. The military was unhappy. So placing missiles in Cuba was a cheap way to secure his political base. So this explains how Khrushchev was under pressure from various sources. And to strengthen his political base, he did this. It is not that he thought in terms of USSR's interests. There were internal problems, and this is what he did. The cheap way. And then take America's case. Republicans were planning to make a big issue of the failure of Bay of Pigs invasion. Republicans. JFK first favored airstrike, but his brother and Attorney General advised blockade. JFK also distrusted CIA's advice after the failure of the invasion. So Kennedy was also subjected to different political pressures, different advices. Okay. So the decision of blockade was arrived at due to various pressures and pulls. Lack of trust with organizations. And then consideration of Republican opinion and things like that. Okay. And then Khrushchev tried to save face by pointing to the US missiles in Turkey. He tried to save face. This is not the same thing as Khrushchev placed the missiles because of this. Okay. So it's his explanation, not the cause. Okay. And then JFK allowed his brother to reach a deal with Soviet ambassador to quietly remove the missiles from Turkey, but only they would be removed several months later. Okay. So in fact, this was done secretly, and Arthur guessed this in his 1971 edition. And in his second edition, by the time he was writing the second edition, he knew that he was right. And then JFK publicly agreed never to invade Cuba. It means something public, something secretive, and various pressures, political calculations, different groups with different views. This is how decision is made. And another thing is that Allison says at so many places and so many times there was a communication gap, and it was very much possible that nuclear war could have happened. So he said that you can never be sure of mad theory. Okay. Dallison's observations. Decisions are result of politicking. And even if leaders share a goal, they differ in terms of how to achieve it. Personal interests and background matter. Even if a leader has absolute power, his command can be misunderstood or ignored if there is no consensus. An entourage of yes men can create a different outcome compared to a group of advisors willing to disagree. Leaders have different levels of power based on charisma, skills of persuasion, ties with decision makers. And if there is no consensus within the inner circle, the opponents will take advantage of it. If a leader is certain, he seeks only approval from his advisors, and advisors must work within that framework. And leaders can take decisions that the groups don't approve. Okay. And then he finally concludes that the idea that MAD could prevent nuclear war was unfounded. Nations can commit suicide. And he gives a different example. Pearl Harbor was attacked, though Japan had no capacity to win against US. Okay. In fact, US was prepared for a sabotage at Pearl Harbor and not an aerial attack, because US thought, why would Japan attack when it knew that US was far more powerful? It means US thought that Japan would take a rational decision, and Japan did not take. Okay. Then he gives an example in Korean context. General Douglas MacArthur moved far north, defying President Harry Truman's orders. And he was not stopped because he was popular. It means the chain of command need not work the way it is planned. So a leader may decide one thing and it may be communicated differently, and then the person here may do something else, and the person here do something else. Many such things are there during the missile crisis. There could have been miscommunication, distortion in communication, or communication not reaching, and the man in the field going by the previous order, though the situation changed. So Allison works out so many possibilities and then says one can never be sure that MAD will save the world. Nations are capable of committing suicide. Okay. So it means that the idea that the nation successfully pursues self-interest is far from truth. So it means we need to be more careful about nuclear weapons. There's one. And second, on the whole, we can't assume that nations are in a position to pursue their self-interest. Rather, we should question if they are doing so, and if they are not doing, why is it so?